called. Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr Speaker, I stand to speak in opposition to this bill. This bill which aims to make Auckland governance less transparent, less accountable and less responsive to Aucklanders. Now, Mr Speaker, before I get into it, I would like to also acknowledge our members of the Select Committee. I think that we had a fantastic team that represented us on that Select Committee, and I want to acknowledge the work of our spokesperson for Auckland issues, Phil Twyford, and also our work of George Hawkins, Sua Williams-Seo and Shane Jones, Mr Speaker. Unfortunately, they did the best job possible, but it came down to numbers and we were outnumbered. Mr Speaker, I'd also like to acknowledge many of the fantastic local body reps, particularly the Mayor of Waitakere, who has been Mayor for 18 years, Bob Harvey, and the Deputy Mayor of Waitakere, Penny Hulse. They do a fantastic job with regards to the way in which they represent Waitakere, the way in which they work effectively with community groups and also with central government to achieve for the best things that they can for their community, Mr Speaker. So that's what I just wanted to start with. Now, it should be of no surprise that Labor opposes this bill, and I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone in this House. We do believe, Mr Speaker, that the Auckland governance structure needs to be changed, and we've thought that for quite some time. But the way the national government has gone about it is undemocratic and smacks of hidden agenda. We believe, Mr Speaker, in a democratic process, and we believe in delivering local government that is in the ownership of people, not corporations. And we've heard that from a number of people. For us, it's about community, not corporations. But unfortunately, the other side of the House thinks differently. We believe in local governance structures that communities can trust. Now, Mr Speaker, this bill delivers none of these things, so it is no surprise that Labor MPs who do believe in transparency, who do believe in proper consultation, and who do believe in the democratic process, we will be voting against this bill. Now, what has been surprising, Mr Speaker, is that Auckland National MPs are not joining us to voice this opposition to the bill. If they had been talking to their people and their electorates, they would know that Aucklanders do not support this bill. Why have they not, in all of the speeches that we've heard today, acknowledged the concerns of the people of Auckland? And why are they assisting Rodney Hyde in ramming this legislation through without proper consultation and seeking to take away control of 3/4 of local government from the people and put in the hands of corporations? They were elected to represent their electorates, but they are sitting back and watching while this legislation goes through. There are a huge number of submissions against this bill from all over Auckland, but I want to start by talking about the submissions that were made from people from Auckland Central, Nikki Kay's electorate. Giving her, and I've said this before in the House, nauseating, over-the-top, greasy conduct with regards to Auckland Central submitters, you'd think that she'd know what her constituents are concerned about. But she pretends that what her government is doing is okay with her electorate. She stands in this House misrepresenting the views of her constituents, not relaying the real views of Auckland Central, but relaying the government's views of this bill and pretending that those views belong to the constituents of Auckland Central. Now, Mr Speaker, Auckland Central was largely worried that council-controlled organisations will take away their democratic rights. That came through in the submissions. They were worried about the corporatisation of local government that this government is encouraging, and they are now also worried about the fact that they have a local MP that has done nothing to address their concerns.
Point of order, Nikki Kay.
Mr Speaker, the member opposite has been making some wild allegations saying that I'm not representing my constituents.
No, these are debating points. This is a robust debate.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, my colleague Jacinda Ardern put forward an amendment to the bill that would have placed a responsibility for waste management with the local Waiheke board. This is part of Nikki Kay's electorate. As MP for Auckland Central, including Waiheke Island, she must know about the poor handling of the island's waste management contract by the Auckland City Council, so why didn't she support the amendment? My colleague Jacinda Ardern also put up an SOP which would have amended the local government Auckland Council bill to ensure youth were consulted in the decision-making process of the governing body and local boards. The amendments would have formally established an Auckland Youth Council at governing body level and territorial youth forums at local body level and requirements for consultation with them. Did Nikki Kay support this SOP? No, she didn't. She thinks that it will suffice that the Mayor has the power to speak to those that are not of voting age. What does that mean in the first place? How can she look in the mirror and honestly say that she has advocated for those that she purports to represent? Another MP who has been unusually quiet over the Super City issue is the member for Waitakere, Paula Bennett. I've been out in the Waitakere electorate talking to the people about the Super City legislation, and I don't know if Paula Bennett has been doing the same thing, but if she had been, she would have heard loud and clear that the people of Waitakere do not like what the government was trying to do. Now, Mr Speaker, one issue that I want to raise that is important to people from Waitakere is with regards to the Waitakere Rangers. Now, we understand that the Rangers belong to Aucklanders, and Waitakere people want reassurance that this won't change. And I put up an SOP that would have seen the legal protection afforded to the Rangers safeguarded. Why didn't Paula Bennett support this? West Aucklanders are protective of their Rangers, Mr Speaker. They fought hard for a law change to give ownership to the Auckland Regional Council because they wanted the Rangers to be recognised for what they are, unique and in need of special protection to ensure that this uniqueness is preserved for generations to come. This was the spirit behind the Waitakere Rangers Heritage Act, which my colleague and former Waitakere electorate MP Lynn Pillay can justifiably be proud of. And for many people in Waitakere, it is painful to watch all their hard work being undermined by the undemocratic process that has been the establishment of the Super City. I think they put forward one message very clearly when they made their submissions. They put a number of messages very clearly forward, but one of them was, do not mess with our Waitakere Rangers. Now, I know how much the people of Waitakere love their Rangers. I know how much they want to see them stay in Auckland ownership. The Rangers are part of Waitakere, part of its identity, and this is what the area stands to lose with the passage of this bill. Paula Bennett should be standing up for her constituents. Instead, she is choosing to ignore their concerns, and that is not good enough. The Royal Commission, this is another issue that I'd like to discuss. The Royal Commission recommended a social issues forum be set up, but the government ignored the recommendation, as it did so many of the other good recommendations. Now, Mr Speaker, it ignored the recommendation for a social issues forum because it only adopted the ideas from the report that fit its own agenda. Never mind what's good for Auckland. But as an Auckland MP and as the Minister for Social Development, Paula Bennett should have pushed for the social issues forum to be established. Now, why didn't she? Because she obviously treats Aucklanders who have concerns over the social impacts of the Super City with the same disdain that she has for beneficiaries who dare to challenge her policy. Now, the third MP, Mr Speaker, that I'd like to talk about is the National MP for Maungakiki, who's largely been absent from this debate.
Order.
And from this debate.
Be careful when you can't refer to someone who hasn't been here. So.
From the debate.
And
that is Pesiata Sam Lotuiinga. Now, where has Sam been with regards to advocating on behalf of our Pacific community? They raised concerns about the Pacific Advisory Board and he was silent. They did not want the sunset clause in the bill, and they did not want the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs deciding who would be their representatives on that board. And yet that member, that Pacific member, the one and only Pacific member who is in government, was silent on the issue. Now, so many submissions were made by residents of Maungakiki, submissions that clearly articulated high levels of concern over the corporatisation of our city and the diminishing of their fundamental democratic rights. And yet that member for Maungakiki stood up in the House last night and told the House that this bill was wonderful. He praised his colleagues for what he cited as a job well done. But I have no doubt that the vast majority of Maungakiki residents do not share his opinion on this bill or on the job that his colleagues did with regards to this bill. Now, I've talked about some of the SOPs, and I want to acknowledge Carol Beaumont and the SOP that she put forward. The SOP that would have amended the local government Auckland Law Reform Bill to ensure that protection against the sale of the ports of Auckland was retained. Maungakiki came out loud and clear that they were opposed to privatisation, and yet the member for Maungakiki, that being Peseta Sam Lotoenga, ignored that, kept silent, and here we have our Labour colleague over here working hard for those people.
Sorry to interrupt the member.
Speaker,
Time has expired. Time has expired.